think sport is the cornerstone of streaming.
Hi, everybody. For today's episode of Retention Zone, the video podcast focused on streaming monetization, I have the pleasure to have with me Alex Logan, who has an accent that is similar to my last guest, Tim Armstrong. Correct, Alex?
You are correct, Carlo.
But you're based in London, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I grew up in Sydney, Australia, and then ended up moving to London about 11 years ago.
Oh, wow. So we can read your Amazon Prime Video, which everybody I'm sure will go, wow, Amazon Prime Video is talking to Carlo. Wow, wow, wow. I'm super excited, to be honest. On the other end, tell me, your journey, not only from Sydney to London, but also professionally. I know there are quite some stories there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I began at Fox Sports Australia when I was still at school. I had a work experience opportunity at Premier Media Group, which was the conglomerate that owned Fox Sports Australia at that time. And I ended up taking on a part-time role throughout the end of school there as a TV logger. That was really exciting as I wanted to do journalism originally, and TV logging was a very good element to get into there, particularly as a sports fan. You get to watch 8 hours of cricket, for example, and then the next morning you've got a 4 hour replay that's been cut by the newsroom. So that was a really good start for me to be able to do that. And I held that job through while I completed a Bachelor of Media Comms Journalism at Union New South Wales in Sydney. I had the opportunity to come to the UK on an ancestry visa. So I took that with both hands. And I very luckily landed a role at Delta Tray, where actually we would have crossed paths at some point there.
Absolutely.
And that Delta Tray experience was fantastic. It was really the first time I had kind of the technical look at how streaming was developing. And a lot of the first screen methodologies, which we now see in the AWS marketplace, overlays and all that, and all of the extra personalization and stats that you want on your one screen. That was the start of my journey, being interested in that type of thing. We were able to launch BT Sport, which is now TNT Sport, and create a full digital product from that. And then that ended up going out to other broadcasters, ATP, all the other properties that BT Sport had, Sky Sports Cricket as well. Some highlights there. My next challenge was moving to Babcock, which ended up being absorbed into Encompass Digital Media, which is a United States service provider. And my main role there was managing the DAZN platform in its infancy.
Oh, wow.
Back then, DAZN was in essence the Netflix of sport. That's how it was marketed,
Yes, I
and it
remember.
was very plain and basic. It was just video, as many rights as possible. And Encompass held the third-party service offering for that. So we would manage anything from Salesforce to Conviva. Every element of that OTT platform was outsourced, which Encompass was able to pick up. And that was actually where I had my first touch point with Amazon Prime Video, with Encompass being a resilient hub, or known as a point of presence, for the launch of EPL in the UK. After that, I moved on to a new challenge, which was picking up my editorial side, but that was GB News, which was the first major broadcaster in the UK for about 30 years that had launched. What was interesting about GB News for me was it is a complete NDI house. So everything was IP based, driving through automation with all the Viz Mozart and all the automation products that we see nowadays. And it was my first exposure to Dina and Mimir, some products that we now see very fluid within the market in AWS and other partners picking up, in essence, to create a story-centric production workflow. I had great experiences there, great touch points with UK House of Commons, obviously the news cycle, which is very much like sport, but just has a different type of impetus to it. And then for the last 2 years, I've been a live operations manager at Prime Video, managing teams of engineers, onboarding all our 1P and 3P products, and basically living in an ecosystem which is driving towards the entertainment hub for all of our customers.
So yeah, quite a I would say quite an heterogeneous experience. So you have seen many angles of the streaming media, if you want, ecosystem. And obviously, this video podcast is focused on streaming monetization. So what, in your view, and you're managing live operations, so obviously it's a very, if you want, inside the house point of view, but there's so much discussion about churn, etc. What is, from your point of view, and it is personal point of view, I don't need an Amazon Prime Video position, what is, the levers that you have? What is the reason for churn, and also what are the solutions for churn in general, not only for Amazon Prime Video? If you have developed your own, train of thought on that.
Yeah, I mean, churn has different applications to what you decide of it. It could be in terms of operational efficiency. How quickly can we get things done? Do I have a technical debt applied to it? And then how do I claw that back for that as well? But there's also churn in terms of subscriber numbers. How do we make sure we maintain subscriber numbers? And particularly nowadays with content being king, it doesn't matter what you're watching now. It kind of matters what you're watching next. So be able to do the retention of that limits our churn. So I know from a Prime Video perspective, being the entertainment hub and the drive towards that, content is king. So we want to be able to reduce subscriber churn by being able to offer different channels, different subscription packages, and other elements of the streaming platform that enables you to stay in one spot to be able to do all of that. Fragmentation is obviously a big issue, particularly in the UK around English Premier League rights. Multiple subscriptions needed just to watch half the games, if not two-thirds. So a churn has a lot of different applications nowadays. And I think what I try to do as well, particularly in my work day to day, is look at how churn can be reduced either through the elements of automation and then also reskilling people. Automation doesn't replace people. People will always need to run automation to certain degrees. But the idea around upskilling people, leveraging those manual tasks, low value tasks to automation, and upskilling people to be able to do more of the personalization, customized aspects of streaming, all comes within churn. Everyone is operating with quite a strict headcount at the moment. We know all the obvious problems within the industry in terms of getting the right skill sets. We saw a really good example during COVID with digital transformation and the need for people to be able to transform into how a business was going to move. That wasn't ready yet. So a lot of what I do day to day is to limit that churn, to streamline what we do. And I'm starting to see that a lot more across the industry as well.
Yeah. And specifically, being also myself somehow originally a tech person, then a product person, then a product marketing person, very often I agree content is king, and people decide what to watch next depending on the series, the movie, the celebrity. But I always had this impression that there is an element that us tech and product people and operation people can do to make people stay more, etc. So I think that's relevant. I think it's less mediatic, or it's too difficult to explain very often. But I think even at the operation level, there are things you can do to avoid subscriber. And I'm talking about subscriber churn now. At product level, the way you design the subtlety of renewals or things like that, there is a lot. I think there's a lot of components that in the end make someone decide to stay as a subscriber or leave for a while. I don't know if I hopefully think you agree because you're in operation, but I mean, tell me what you think about it, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of discussion at the moment in the industry around eyeball retention and how to keep elements of people watching an event, but then keep them watching. Anyone who's worked in live operations knows their metrics start to go off and alarms start to trigger off once an event ends, because natural customer behavior is to leave an event tile open or just walk off and go do something else. I've seen a lot of really good progress from WWE, for example, who hold exclusive VOD content related to the main event they've had previously. So eyeball retention works with that as well. How do we able to maximize advertising for that additionally? So retention is very, very key for that. And having worked in operations, I understand full well of how upstream teams can, be able to work with different businesses, different third parties, maybe sign something that, in essence gets dumped on your desk and you're going to have to try and deliver it somehow. So I actually feel that the driver between business and retention is actually closer to product and operations. Operations will be able to tell you what they can deliver, what they intend to deliver, creating a product that complements that, and then being able to sell that as one whole suite to people creates the whole platform of what we want. And that's not necessarily a product out of the box, but it's being able to be flexible and customizable for that. And that's something that I've experienced across different roles, that level of customization. But you add personalization into the customization, that's where we start to really get into the depths of, this is your one-stop shop for all of your viewing habits.
And previously, and I work, I've used them, and there are others also. But the data side of things. You mentioned Conviva. There is a lot of, I think, use of AI, in this case, maybe not purely generative. There is a lot of use of AI trying to get all these engagement consumption data. And again, let us remind the audience that we're not talking about one device. There are so many devices, so many use cases. So the amount of data that you can now, with the sensor that you can put in your product, collect about streaming consumption is immense. Very often the data is more than we can digest, and I think AI not only can help us, extract pattern, but it's also tools that you use to try to think what is the next thing I can measure, I think. But I don't know if you have an opinion on this more data side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly at Prime Video, data
Yeah, I
is
can imagine.
anything that runs with anecdote, right? You're very, very hard to be able to change something or be able to progress something without data, and that's key to what we do. But I think in a streaming sense, data is probably down to two things, which for me seem like the hot topics at the moment, and that's quality of service and quality of experience. And they become defined in different elements from that. So when you touch on Gen AI, particularly with video analytics, it's being able to extract the needle out of the haystack. And particularly with Prime Video being global and having such a large subscriber base, we have devices from everywhere. We can't replicate every single device. We have a very high bar to try and get as many devices as possible against our coverage, be able to test and validate that before a production goes live. But at the same time, we're unable to do that. So it's almost trying to get as much audience as possible. And I'm sure we can appreciate in different markets, mobile devices, particularly in Asia, 3P Android devices are very, very hard to import even into certain countries, let alone try and replicate experiences. So I think you've kind of nailed it on the head. The data is very, very key in different elements. Finding how the data is telling the story that you need it is the challenge at the moment.
So one question that I think many people want to ask is, okay, Amazon Prime Video is somehow inside the Amazon system, inside the Amazon Prime ecosystem. Can you talk about, for what you can, about the relationship between this entity of the ecosystem?
Absolutely. So Prime Video is a business that probably could stand by itself, but within the Amazon ecosystem, it becomes stronger. So when we talk of Prime Video, we also talk about the Amazon MGM Studios acquisition and that part of the business, which is now under one conglomerate under Mike Hopkins. And then we look at Amazon as a holistic business. So Amazon, drives to become part of everyday life. And Prime Video is able to leverage that. It leverages data from people. It leverages other marketing opportunities, e-commerce opportunities. And we've talked about overlays before. So there's a smorgasbord of opportunities and the data collection that Amazon holds that can utilize and personalize that product through that. There's different things around virtual product placement. Which we see within the industry, where your buying habits, your other elements can go into that to enhance your experience. A really good example is Roku and Walmart's partnership in the US, where you're able to have a Walmart card on your Roku device. You're watching a Roku TV channel, you see a nice product, you press one button and you bought it from that. We've seen other elements, particularly with video overlays, where you could have Messi taking a free kick. He scores, and the first thing that pops down is buy his boots right now. They're the things that really start to engage people from that. And Amazon is able to picture that. And I think having the business of that size and the workforce of that size, particularly corporate side, us understanding what people do every day makes us better at being able to personalize and create the best customer experience for what you want. And I think that is an advantage that we're able to have in the ecosystem. Now, obviously, that also might have some difficulties, right? Navigating Amazon as a big business is, difficult to do at the start. And then once you get into it, you're able to understand how that ecosystem works and the reasons why we have a high bar. Working within the framework of the 16 leadership principles as well helps us look at things slightly differently, but also work with our partners. And I think that is what's important when you're working at a place like Amazon, is that big picture, and the big picture
Mm.
is the customer.
That's a great segue. Another question is, End of January, you introduced the ad-based offer for Prime Video. If you can say how is it going, or I mean, how does it work for you? Whatever you can say, clearly.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, the ad-supported tiers is something that Amazon, had an idea of doing. Every other streaming platform is doing it as well, but isn't
Yep.
necessarily a driver for why Amazon does it as well. But I think where I come, the way I look at it based on in community is the only way that we can be as good for everyone, the whole population, the spectrum of the community that we have, is to be able to have the content to that side and be able to also have the audience to that side. So when we start to see, particularly in the US, premium subscription packages start to go up to, between 15, probably $20 US soon, some of that becomes unaffordable to people on a budget.
Mhm.
So ad-supported tiers enables companies or streaming companies to be able to leverage advertiser and grow that relationship, which will only get bigger and bigger exponentially. But
Mhm.
additionally to that, it enables the platforms to also go into the homes of people who might not have the ability to go to the premium package. So it's kind of being able to please both audiences, make sure you have a bigger grasp of those audiences, and be able to get into their homes and give them the service that they need. So for me, that demographic spread is a lot better to be able to retain a larger pool of subscribers, and as well start to emanate business with advertising as well.
And I think I've heard from many others, it also give flexibility of having someone in the family, maybe going to a lower tier for a period, coming back, depending on the content. It's also a way, and I think for Amazon, easier for others to keep the consumer always in, I call it in the family, whatever you want to say, in your ecosystem somehow. So the other question I wanted to ask, and you went there for a moment, what about sport? How is sport? And you have to say it's crucial, so otherwise my audience will be very angry. If you say sport is irrelevant, nobody will like it. But how is sport instrumental to what Amazon Prime Video is doing now?
I think sport is the cornerstone of streaming. Simple as. I think, particularly live, live news has some type of debate to it, opinion where people can come in and do it, and engage with it. Sport just has this pull that people want, whether it's a certain level of tribalism that's acceptable to be able to drive towards that, but also just that big event feel.
Mm.
So sport is obviously incredibly important to what we do at Prime Video and that offering. And I think you started to see that shift in the market as well. So, obviously in the US, TNF is a crown jewel for Prime Video. We've recently
Yeah.
also picked up NASCAR, which is really, really exciting for
Yes.
all the sports fans as well. And that naturally just starts to extend out other content opportunities, other relationships and partners as well. So I like to look at sports. I'm a massive sports fan myself. So for me to look at it as a fan as well as working in the industry, it gets to a point where sport is what makes you different from those SVOD platforms. If you've got the big game, you've got the big game. But let's also remember that, when we look at sports, there's also the commercial side of that. And a lot of the commercial side doesn't actually get calibrated in terms of viewing figures, data, anything of that nature. So for me, sport is integral to a sporting platform, particularly live entertainment, to move forward. And we're no different at Prime Video. But it's not only the game, it's the property brand that you're also able to
Mm.
leverage. And my experience is rights holders themselves want to make sure that they're monetized not only on the event, but all the extracurricular activity around it.
Yeah. Yeah. So in a way, sport is one of the maybe most important tools in this the retention war or streaming war, I think, because you see how, and I have observed that the US market is is taking very different approaches to the European market in terms of media rights. I think you big guys more present in the US, traditional broadcaster in key media rights in Europe. I think that maybe because of the moment, I mean, the geopolitical economic moment, the big US companies are focusing a lot on US sport, and not saying that they're not focusing, but I've seen the media rights for the Premier League and Serie A. Still, the I would say traditional media companies have still a role there. But again, I think it's a very nice scenario to observe, and the evolution of it will be, I mean, with people that
Absolutely.
have
And
spent a long time in the industry, it's good. It's nice to see transformation happen. To be honest.
No, absolutely, and we look at it. I look at it as from there are the main players in the industry, and really streaming companies are the new players in terms of having the capital, but also the desire and the model. And we saw that with Netflix getting the Christmas Day NFL game, as a really
Yeah,
simple aspect of it, and they simply justified it. They would probably they're forecasting a higher return based on if they spent the same amount of money producing a movie and doing other elements to that as well. So sport also enables you to take a bit more control of the creativity for that. But as well, at Prime Video, because we have a global platform, it's also getting your foot in the door into those territories, understanding new territories which might have been ignored before or didn't have the same connectivity 20 years ago as it does now.
yeah, yeah,
How are
yeah.
we able to penetrate that market and also pull those audiences? And naturally, localized content then starts to come along, and you end up serving countries and territories and populations that you just didn't think was possible previously.
Yeah, and it sounded like you were talking about India, but I don't want to extract words from your thoughts. But that's a good
No,
example, I
so
think.
I mean, upcoming in Prime Video, we have Premier League rights in Denmark and Sweden, which are coming,
Yeah,
which is great. And there are others in the pipeline. Wimbledon in Germany is another one as well. So there are always opportunities out there, and I think that also comes from the customers. As I said,
mhm.
data is also there, but also content is king. We want to be able to produce as much content, or at least license enough content, so our viewers have one stop to come and they can watch what they need to watch.
Okay, so thank you for bringing us inside the world of Amazon Prime Video. And I really like that you took the time to do it from London, even if the accent, like my accent, to be honest, is always there, which I think it's nice. A bit of diversity, even if we are two white males, but it's good to have many English nuances spoken in our industry, I think.
No, absolutely, Carlo. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you, and yeah, look forward to keeping the dialogue offline as well.
Thank you. Ciao, ciao, Alex.
See you, Carlo.